And it's not sexy to talk about intake. Nobody's like, oh, I want to talk about intake. No, they want to talk about marketing. And it's a really unproductive relationship to be a marketing team that doesn't talk about intake. Because if the intake isn't airtight, then the marketing dollars are not going to be maximized. You just proved one of inalienable truths of intake, which is speed to lead. You have to be the first to answer. There is no loyalty. If they don't answer, I'm on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. What if people are always worried about spending dollars on training because they think, what if I train the team and they leave? And Henry Ford said, what if you don't train them and they stay?
You are listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. You're listening to Sharp Strategies, Sweet Success. I am your host, Tiffany Swedensky, and today I'm talking with Kerri Coby White of Kerri James. I first met her actually through a client. You worked with Scott Vicknair and trained their amazing intake team, and they do absolutely fantastic on the phone. So, I mean, that's really saying something. And then I think you and I linked up and met at a PILMA event earlier, the AI for PI Expo. I'll have to say, even though we had a mutual client, I really admire your work from afar because intake and picking up the phones and handling what's effectively a sales relationship is so important for these law firms. And for the firms that want to get serious about marketing, they're kind of thrown off by how early people start talking to them about how are you answering the phones? How what's that process like? Super happy to have you on the show. And I'm going to turn it over to you and have you finish out the introduction.
Oh, well, thank you, Tiffany. Delighted to be here. It's a pretty small world when you get into PI and the PILMA community in particular. So if you're not part of it listening out there, definitely check it out. It's funny you said how working with Scott Vicknair was our introduction. My pitch for a while when people ask me what I do, I say, I make marketing teams look good because people really underestimate the importance of the intake team. And it's not sexy to talk about intake. Nobody's like, oh, I want to talk about intake. No, they want to talk about marketing and what we're going to do and how many leads we're going to get. But what I found is that it's a really unproductive relationship to be a marketing team that doesn't talk about intake. Because if the intake isn't airtight, then the marketing dollars are not going to be able to really pursue the true value of that pipeline. So we do need to think like salespeople. Intake is the sales force of the law firm. And my job over these last many years has been ensuring that those marketing dollars as well invested as possible. And that means spending some focus, some effort, some time and money on making intake really strong.
It's incredible how many ways intake can go wrong. It's also incredible like how high the threshold is. And I don't usually try to start out the podcast by talking so much, but earlier, like 2 weeks ago, I was looking for somebody to do siding repair on the side of my house. And being a marketer, I was trying like the organic results first, like the people who their website showed up, their Google business profile showed up. And interesting, I called everyone in the map pack and nobody answered. I don't know, maybe it was a little bit early or went to voicemail. And then I grit my teeth and called the local service ads result. And actually that law firm didn't answer, but within seconds, I was called by a company selling just all over like siding replacement or something. I just got thrown in this siding repair sales pipeline and they almost got me. They almost got me on a single call, but they're like, and what time will your husband be home? We have to have both people there.
Coming.
And I was like, why?
This is the exact story I had with window replacement. So I know it well. And to anybody listening out there, do not ever fill out that calculate the cost of your windows form somewhere on the internet because you have just invited the entire East Coast to tell you about your windows. Tiffany, I had the very same experience that you had with your siding company when I was really shamed into putting an electric fence at my house. We got 2 new puppies in the neighborhood and my dog suddenly became a wanderer. And so my next door neighbor said, Kerri, have you considered an electric fence? And I was like, oh gosh, no, I guess I have to do that now. And so I literally Googled electric fence companies near me and just like you called 1, 2, 3, and not one answered. The second one immediately rang back. And I said, wow, you just proved one of the inalienable truths of intake, which is speed to lead. You have to be the first to answer. There is no loyalty. We're all so used to everything being on demand that we are just moving on. If they don't answer, I'm on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. You're lucky if you're a referral firm and they're actually like, no, I really want Tiffany Swedinsky. Otherwise, they're moving on and they could be talking to me. On that call, that electric fence company, I required absolutely no talking into this. I wasn't evaluating. I was an embarrassed good neighbor, and I was ready to drop $3,000 immediately on the spot, no questions asked. And the guy who called me back first got my business. So we need that lesson to be visible by every firm out there that there's no brand loyalty and speed wins. Now, obviously, from a marketing perspective, you need to be there to get the call in the first place. And so we have to know all the ways that people are attracting business. And you know what's really interesting to me, Tiffany, as people who do marketing? I'm shocked at how little people know about marketing. It still reminds me of Priscilla from Salesforce when I was first freelancing, like let's call it 15, 20 years ago, 15, I guess. I would get an email from Priscilla at Salesforce on a regular basis. And I was like, man, this woman is relentless. It got to the point where I was like, does she have a life? Like, what does Priscilla from Salesforce have to do? And I didn't yet know about automation. And so when we look at the things that we're thinking of, it's very different than what the average consumer is thinking of. So they may be clicking on that LSA, and LSA firm or LSA siding company that didn't answer your call. I'm very disappointed in you if you're listening to this podcast, because shame on you. The prices on the internet, especially for legal, are the highest priced verticals out there, and they expect that you are never losing a lead. And so if you think that you're going to put some money in an LSA and answer the phone, not answer the phone, whatever, number one, they'll stop rewarding you with leads. And number two, your cost per acquisition will be astronomical. So how do we fix this? There's this old joke my dad used to tell all the time about a guy who was sitting in a restaurant. He called the waiter over and said, taste the soup. And the waiter said, what's wrong with the soup, sir? He said, taste the soup. Is it too salty, too sweet? And the guy again, taste the soup. He goes, sir, is it not hot enough? Did you want something different? He says, taste the soup. And the waiter looks around and goes, can I get a spoon? He hadn't tasted his own soup because there was no spoon. So you have to taste the soup in your own practice. You need to act like a lead. First off, did you show up online? Did you click the button? Did it actually call your firm? Did someone answer? I've got firms that I work with that have 80 tracking numbers in play. 80 tracking numbers can get kind of messy and sometimes break. Are we testing those tracking numbers? So when I put a request in through a form on your website, does it go to a black hole or does it go to your intake system? Okay, it goes to your intake system. Does it notify the intake team? These are all the things that are expected of marketing firms if they intend to optimize their return on investment. And you have to think of this as an investment. There's a great line, I may be faulty here, but I believe it was from Henry Ford. Henry Ford said, people are always worried about spending dollars on training because they think, what if I train the team and they leave? And Henry Ford said, what if you don't train them and they stay? And so you have to think of this as part of your marketing investment. Getting the best CPA, the best cost per acquisition, means making sure you've got the right team ready to answer the call.
You said something really good in there, and I'll just relay something that happened to me earlier today. I'm working with a client. I was auditing their Google business, and I came across their business listing and saw a phone number that I didn't recognize, wasn't in the tracking account. With a shaky hand, I called it. And thankfully, it did actually connect to the law firm, but sometimes we're not so lucky.
That's tasting the soup, and everybody needs to do that. This is another really interesting thing just on the Google business profile. Consumers can make edits, make suggestions. And every now and then, I'll have a client say, who said this stuff? Well, It could be anyone who made a suggestion that Google accepted. And so be careful with things like that. You need to taste the soup, a steady diet of soup for you.
Soup sounds good. I know what I'm doing for dinner tonight. You probably talk to a lot of lawyers who have at some point figured out intake is their problem. I'm talking with lawyers and they're just thinking about marketing sometimes.
Always.
And I'll talk to them and they want to invest, they want to get more leads, and they're the ones in charge of intake. Or there's somebody who's like part-time in a dual role, paralegal intake or reception intake. I'm always kind of struggling, like, how do I convince them that intake is something they need to fix? I mean, honestly, like before we even start getting heavy into marketing.
It has to be. Yeah, it has to be airtight. So I have the intake conversation before I have any of the marketing conversation, because the last thing I want you to do is spend money that does not result in cases. And I have often told the story of my first big marketing client who I was so excited to walk in there and share my wonderful first month results and see all these happy faces and how delighted I made them. And I was greeted by absolute grumpiness because they didn't sign clients. I had all the impressions, the click-through rates, the form fills, the phone calls. They didn't have clients. And so when I say I make marketing teams look good, it's because I had to get my hands down deep in the dirt and figure out, well, all the marketing seems to be doing well. Why aren't we signing clients? You mentioned a couple of things in there that are red flags to me. Number one, you talked about the investment. I think a lot of attorneys really start to see the business of running a law practice as this really exciting, high stakes gamble, right? I can spend this money and I might get the $1 million case. I roll the dice again. I might get into mass torts, and then the mass tort money comes in and I can open up in 7 new states. And you can see how excited people get when they crack the marketing code. Intake is so marketing adjacent that it should be part of that calculation, and it isn't. Like I said, it's just not sexy. And quite frankly, they don't want to believe just anybody could sign a lead, could not sign a lead, could convert, could not convert. They just think, obviously, if it's a qualified call, we help them. But it's more nuanced than that. And when you have a good sales team, you see that difference. So what is that good sales team? Reminds me of another thing you said in that. When the attorney does the intake, that I never recommend that, okay? When you call a law office, you shouldn't be talking to the lawyer. You don't call a doctor's office and get to talk to the doctor. Now, a lot of lawyers offer these free consultations. One of the most important changes I make out of the gate is having the intake team, A, not call themselves an intake team because nobody's ready for intake, and B, introduce themselves for the purpose of consultation. My name is Kerri. Thank you for calling the ABC firm. My role here is to provide you with a thorough consultation so that you can make some really good decisions today. Let them know that we're going to consult. My role as a consultant is to take all these areas of unknown and bring clarity to you. And if I'm able to successfully bring clarity to you, then you'll be ready for intake. And that's the way I like to approach it. I'm screening, I'm selling, I'm signing them up, and then I'm scheduling an intake. It's not intake out of the gate. And so the first thing the firm needs to do is realign what they are offering, which is a consultation, not an intake, with what the client is calling for, which is, again, a consultation, not an intake.
And that is such a good point. I hadn't thought about that. And something else that you said is that attorneys think of marketing, and maybe it's not just attorneys. I feel like maybe many people see marketing as a gamble. And when you think of it like that, you're rolling the dice, you're spinning the wheel, you're pressing, like you're pulling the lever, whatever. That's very automatic. You do the one thing and then you see results. And I keep wondering why so many people walk into marketing with that assumption, because it's like, no, this is a lot of work. Like, we got to do some research, we got to gather some data. And, attorneys like wonder why is it taking so long? Because they want that, instant gratification. But,
if it were that easy, they'd all be doing it, right? You have to have the money, the stomach. The unique thing with law firm life specifically is that it's a longer close cycle. The value of the client is there, but the money may not be there for another year, 2 years, right? So you have to have skin in the game for a while before you see the benefits. You have to be able to reinvest. You're always hoping for the big one, but the reality is that the little ones are what keep the coals burning. So you have to have have before anyone markets, we're saying, they need to know about intake. They also need to know about the return on investment cycle. What I spend now, and this is a really important one for me for intake. I want to know what leads were generated with these marketing dollars this month. So if a lead comes into the pipeline on the 30th of the month and doesn't sign the papers till the 4th of the next month, that is still a lead from May. It's a close from May, not June, because I always want to know the dollars were spent, the leads were generated, and the cases were signed. That way I know, okay, well, if I increase my budget, if I decrease my budget, if Bruce is on vacation this month, what does that do? Should I pull back my marketing budget since we're down a person, since we're down the best person? Those are all things that are variables that do deeply impact results. And so if we are complete and total data dorks, which I and many marketers value deeply, you're studying this stuff and making informed decisions. You're not just taking a gamble. It can turn into a gamble if you're just throwing money at it. And compared to, where this industry was in 30, 40 years ago, or even early days of the internet, throw your money at it and lots of magical things happened. The margins have shrunk. The competition has increased. The marketing platforms have gotten far more technical. This is not a no stakes game. It's a high stakes game, and you need to account for all those variables.
And you were talking about the viewing cases by the date they were signed up. And that is the one thing that trips up so many law firms and
So many.
it really messes with how they view their data, because I've seen these situations where, oh no, this month is a terrible month, or something like that, or last month was a terrible month. And then we change the date, what date we're looking at, not the date the case was signed up, but the date the lead was generated. And all of a sudden, that month looks like a really good month. It was just a longer pipeline. The marketing generated the lead in this month. We signed it in this month. It's important to view those numbers that way. And
yeah, more importantly, though, we are so married to the 30-day period between 1 and 30, which is really absurd. It's a 30-day trend that you should be looking at, right? Every day we can see what the 30-day trend looks like. One day falls off, one day comes on, and I can see over the 30 days how it's looking. You can pick any obscure 30 days and get data, or you can pick a different 30 days and get different data. I was once a teacher, and I taught, among other things, 5th grade math. And I would tell the kids, you got to squint at graphs to get a vibe, right? You need to see the trend. You need to know how it's going more generally than specifically to be able to make decisions. And especially with, again, the long sales cycle, or at least the long close cycle, the time between spending the money and making the money is a long period of time. So I like to function on forecasts, because if you tell me the revenue last month was insane, well, that may be from a lead that was generated 4 years ago. Okay. So we need to, and I have a couple of clients that I specifically focus on this. What was the average value of a case last year? That's what I want to know. Just every case that came in, all the attorney's fees divided by the number of cases, period. I don't want you to take off the really good ones. I don't want you to take off the really bad ones. I don't want you to talk to me about we wouldn't have lost that one, but I took it because it was my mother-in-law's sister's next door neighbor's best friend. I don't care. I need to know how many leads or how many cases resulted in how many dollars. And that average is going to let me know what we can stomach in terms of acquisition costs. So if I know my average case value is $17,000, I need to know, well, am I comfortable going up to $5,000 a case, or is that going to make me sick to my stomach? Because it's a numbers game, and we need to be able to make informed decisions based on statistical averages. And I think everyone will find this very interesting, because I'm working with firms across the country. It's still just about around $15,000 a case. It's about that. I have some firms that they take everything and it's 12. And then I have some firms that if they're doing a lot of marketing, they may get it as high as, maybe 25. But at the end of the day, it's usually around 15. And if I can work to say, okay, well, we're going to spend $100,000 in marketing, And that is going to generate about $1.5 million in revenue. Well, then I'd say that's a pretty darn good spend. One of the advantages this industry has is that you are not selling ice cream cones. You've got a very high value solution that people need. And if your intake team is selling it right, they recognize that they're going to do a heck of a lot better working with you than working on their own.
I talk to a lot of attorneys who are very interested in marketing automations because it sounds like a very low personnel way to do intake. You automate it, you get it to the point, and then if it's good, the attorney calls them back, or if it's good, we'll call them back. Talk about how you coach law firms on how to marry automations or how much to lean on them.
Yeah. In short, I hate it. I've been telling people who are using AI voice agents to screen calls that, we're in beta. The data's not here yet, is what I was saying for years. The data's here now. People do not like doing things like this with robots. The data says that. They don't mind texting so much. Okay. So having chatbots that do some screening and qualifying and then scheduling would be great. But what we know, and the data proves, that when robots talk to us, the stakes are much higher. So if you upset somebody, they're really upset because they feel like they've been manipulated. Okay. So where I think there is a lot of automation that can be done, this is what I consider smart marketing. My intake system actively communicates with the campaigns to help us identify better leads, to help us create audiences without having lookalikes, which aren't allowed in legal. So if we're able to use the data to help get better leads, then we are to some degree doing some of that back-end automation. It can go back to the fact that you are not selling ice cream cones. I accept that I'm going to have to speak to robots if I'm calling Amazon or Google or Verizon. I am a client in a crisis. I expect to be met by somebody who is going to solve my problem empathetically, make me feel heard and understood. And I think the question you need to ask yourself before you ever deploy any of that kind of technology is, why am I doing this? And if the answer is only for cost cutting, then I believe you need to reevaluate your decisions. If it is because you don't speak that language, or it's in the middle of the night and I don't have staff, or my staff is doing a terrible job, well, then those are reasons to consider. But at the end of the day, there is need for qualified people doing the work that only qualified people can do.
And when somebody makes the commitment to call, there is an expectation they will talk to somebody. And you gave some good exceptions, the corporation, something like that. So one of my clients tried to implement AI voice agent, and I was against it, but I'm kind of a let's see how it goes type person. I wanted a real life story. And we struggled because it didn't pass snuff with our internal team. And then one day, my client said he needed to make a change to his insurance policy that he couldn't do online. He called the 1-800 number, was greeted by an AI voice agent, which announced itself. And he said, without thinking, I said, I want to talk to a human. And he was like, and that's when I realized we shouldn't be doing this.
We shouldn't be doing this. Tiffany, if anyone cares to visit my YouTube page, I have a 30-minute, maybe even an hour presentation on using AI, how using AI in the intake department especially can be useful and can be hazardous. Because here's an interesting data point from one of my colleagues in the space. His AI voice agents, they tested announcing that they were AI agents and not announcing. And the drop off once they announced it was significant. I want to say it went from 70 to 30%, something like that. It was huge. The question you have to ask yourself then is, am I willing to give those people up, those that drop off because I don't announce it, or am I willing to be manipulative and not forthcoming with the people who call me? And then that question is, well, then what do we value? Because we've spent the last decade talking about empathy and relationship building and rapport. and then you're going to go unleash a robot. You're lucky you're not selling ice cream cones. That client is valuable, and maybe you need to talk to 9 others to get to the good one, but there's still value in it. If there weren't value in it, then Google wouldn't be charging the prices they charge to make your phone ring. So to that, I simply say there are things that humans need to do, find other things to automate.
A marketer that I know, she's great. She works for a law firm and she's trying really hard to build up all of their marketing and systems. She's a one-person team. And at the law firm, not the owner, but an attorney who works there does all of the intake. And she told me about the situation she's in where, she's working hard, generating the leads, but this attorney rejects practically anything that's not an obvious slam dunk. Obviously, that's an issue with her and the leadership team trying to communicate precisely what they need to change in that process. But how would you communicate? What would you tell that law firm?
So that comes right back to the case average, okay? If you want to be in this marketing, in it to win it game for the long term, you're going to have to sign cases that are only going to net $3,000, and maybe you paid $2,500 for that case, okay? But that's what refurbishes the pot that you got that case from. So we keep people busy. We barely made any money. I get it, but that will keep fueling the marketing. So if you're signing cases, I'm signing cases at $1,400 to $1,700 a month. If those people are turning down $3,000 cases, that cost is going to go up. If you say, well, we're only taking this level of criteria, then I need to be very honest with them and say, okay, you're looking at $5,000 case acquisition costs. Where I typically go is you either need to be willing to sign the little cases, or you need to have a referral system in place so that those little cases that you paid $2,000 for, someone's paying you $2,000 for. Because we're not going to be on the same page if you don't tell me what you're looking for and what you're willing to pay for it. The question I get all the time that drives me crazy is, how much do I need to spend? And that is such a silly question. The budget is based on your appetite, what you're trying to achieve, how it's being deployed. And we all need to get on the same page with that before we ever start marketing. What team is in place? What technology are you using? How quickly are you getting in front of leads? I need to know all of those things before we turn on a spigot of lead flow that is costing money all day, every day, and not becoming cases.
I really enjoy talking with you. I could talk with you for another 2 hours. I was at an event last week, and it felt like every talk who was serious about marketing also mentioned how important intake was. And
Exactly.
I really hope law firm owners get the message, because it's the hardest thing to master, but it's the most important thing. Before we close up for the day, Kerri, what's something that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I'll leave it with this, Tiffany, just because it is such an important relationship, the intake and the marketing, that if we can get attorneys to look at that as one cohesive department and, maybe change the budget to say our marketing and intake budget as opposed to just our marketing budget, and start looking at it that way, that would be one thing. The one thing I'll end with, though, is if you want your intake team to be doing an exceptional job, you're going to have to train them and hold them accountable to it. So don't just think that you're going to train them once and walk away and your intake team is going to be thriving. If you're not listening to calls, or someone isn't listening to calls, reviewing, providing feedback, setting standards and meeting them, then you've got work to do on your intake. So taste the soup, go through your intake process. You can certainly contact us for how to taste the soup or train the team or see where you are with that. If you want to get more out of your marketing budget, the first place you should begin is with your intake team. The last thing you want to do is just start spending more money, generating more leads that are going to be left behind.
And don't just have ChatGPT generate an intake guidebook for you and hand it off to that one person and expect it all to work. I've seen that more than I care to admit. Where do you want people to look you up and learn more about you, reach out to you?
You can find me just about everywhere with all 3 names. Kerri, Kerri, Coby, Coby, white like the color. I'll be on all your socials there. And you can visit Kerri James, that's KerriJames.co. And you can also pick up a couple chapters of my book for free on the website, or reach out to me and schedule a chat. I'd love to talk.
Well, thank you so much for being on this show. And thank you so much for everyone listening. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Tiffany.